rifle up, a woman on her knees, begging the woman he would marry. Before we get into the story, go ahead and hit that like button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. His gun was up and her hands were raised and she was asking him not to shoot her. And what she offered that night was desperation wrapped in dignity. And he would spend the rest of his life grateful he had the sense to hear the difference. The winter of 1881 hit the New Mexico territory like a hammer. A former cavalry scout named Elias Cord lived alone in a 2-room shack at the foot of the Oscura Mountains, a man who had given up on people and who did not expect one to show up bleeding at his door in the dark. He had no reason to let her live. She had no reason to trust him. What began as a coerced bargain in the worst cold of the decade would become the one thing neither of them had gone looking for. Watch this story all the way to the end. You will not want to miss what she says to him in the spring. The Oscura Mountains did not earn their name by accident. In Spanish, the word means dark, and dark was exactly what those peaks were in the long months before the new year. Black ridgelines against a blacker sky. No softness anywhere. No apology in the wind. Elias Cord had been stationed near those mountains 15 years earlier, a young army scout reading the land for cavalry columns that moved slower than the country they crossed. He had been good at it. Better than most, he could read a dry wash and tell you how long ago water had run through it. He could look at a campfire ring and estimate the band's size from ash weight alone. The army had used those skills until it had no more use for him, and then it sent him home with a lieutenant's commendation, a knee that would never bend right again, and nothing else worth carrying. He had tried San Antonio for a year after his discharge. The noise of it wore on him. Wagons and voices and church bells and men who wanted to hear war stories over whiskey. Men who treated the worst years of his life like something to be envied. He left without telling anyone and rode northwest until the towns got smaller and then stopped appearing altogether. He found the shack along an old cavalry supply trail, 3 walls standing and a 4th that needed rebuilding, and he rebuilt it. He dug out the well, patched the roof with salvage tin, set traps along the creek and began the slow, mostly wordless work of surviving alone. That had been 6 years ago. He was 38 now, lean and brown from the sun, his dark hair gone silver at the temples. He had one mule named Grit, a wood stove that drafted poorly in south winds, and a Sharp's rifle he kept cleaner than anything else he owned. He did not go into the town of Ingle more than twice a month, and when he did, he said as little as possible and came back the same day. The storekeeper's wife had stopped trying to make conversation with him after the second winter. That suited him fine. He did not think of himself as lonely. Loneliness required you to want something you didn't have, and Elias had made a project of wanting nothing. The sky changed every day, the desert every season. That was enough. He was wrong, of course, but he didn't know that yet. The night she came to his door, the temperature had dropped to something near 0. He had banked the fire at dusk and gone to sleep early, the way a man does when the cold makes everything outside the blanket feel punishing. He woke at a sound he could not immediately name, not coyotes, not the wind working the loose tin on the north eave. Something else. A sound with weight to it, irregular, close to the door. He was on his feet with the sharps in his hands before he was fully awake. The habit of a scout, you did not stop to think about whether it was real. You moved first and processed it after. He pressed himself to the wall beside the door, listened. The sound came again, low, almost human. He kicked the door open and stepped out, rifle up, eye already down the barrel. There was a figure on his porch, small, collapsed against the doorframe, one hand up with the fingers spread wide, the other pressed against her ribs. The lantern light from inside caught her face, and he saw she was a woman. Apache, from the look of her dress, fringed deerskin, beadwork on the collar, her dark hair loose and matted with something frozen at the ends. Her face was not afraid. Exactly, it was past afraid. It was the face of someone who had used up all their fear already, and had nothing left but the arithmetic of survival. She looked at his rifle. She looked at him. Then she did something he had not seen a person do in years, at least not to him. She got lower. She moved from a slumped position to her knees, both hands up now, and she spoke. The words were, "Apache, Chiricahua Apache." He recognized the sound of it, though he had never been fluent. He had learned enough in his scouting years to get by in trades, enough to understand the shape of a sentence even if he missed the particulars. What he heard her say was something close to, "I am not a raider, I am alone. Please." And then, because he still had not lowered the rifle, she switched to English. Broken, halting English, but English. "I will work," she said. "Cook, carry wood, whatever you want from a wife, only do not shoot me." The word wife sat in the cold air between them like something dropped. Elias stared at her. He had not moved the rifle. His finger was not on the trigger, he was careful about that, but the barrel had not dropped either. He was trying to calculate what this was. A trick, possibly. He had heard stories of raids that used a woman at the door as a lure. He had also seen enough of the territory to know that a Chiricahua woman, alone in this cold, with whatever was wrong with her side, did not need to be part of any trick. She just needed to not die tonight. "How many with you?" he said. "No one," she said. "You rode here?" "Walked." "My horse," she stopped. Something passed across her face. "My horse is gone." "How long you been walking?" She did not answer. Either she didn't know or the number was too large to say out loud. He looked past her, out into the dark. The wind had picked up and it was blowing fine granular snow sideways across the yard. There was nothing out there that he could see, no firelight, no shapes. Nothing but dark and cold and the sound of the wind working every loose thing on the property. He lowered the rifle. He did not invite her in with words. He stepped back from the doorway and left it open, which was invitation enough. She got herself up from her knees and came inside. He saw then how bad the side was. She moved like it hurt with every breath. One hand pressed to the left side of her ribs, and when she passed through the lantern light he could see the stain on her dress was blood. Old and dried, but a lot of it. He pointed at the chair by the wood stove, and she sat. He added wood to the fire without speaking, and when it was going again he turned and looked at her properly. She was young, not as young as she had seemed collapsed against the doorframe, but young, maybe 25, maybe a few years more. Her face was angular and sharp-boned, her eyes very dark and direct. Even sitting there half dead, she held herself with a quality he found harder to name than he expected. Not arrogance, not performance, just the particular posture of someone who has never learned to make themselves smaller. "Your name," he said. She considered whether to give it. That hesitation told him something. "Yussin's people call me Nizhoni," she said. "The ones who come after us call me something else." "Which ones?" "Reed's men." The name landed. He knew it. Bryce Reed was a speculator out of Socorro who had bought land grants of questionable legitimacy and spent the last 3 years making the Apache who had lived on that land feel the cost of his title. He ran a crew of hard men who were not strictly legal and not strictly illegal. In that gray space the territory allowed if you had enough money and the right county sheriff. "Reed's men do that to your side?" Elias asked. She looked at the stove. "My husband did not leave his land when Reed's men told him to. They came back with rifles. My husband is dead now. The wound on my side is from when I ran." He was quiet a moment. "How long ago?" 4 days. 4 days. He did not say what he was thinking, which was that she was more durable than she looked. "What were you going to do if you made it past tonight?" he said. "I do not know," she said. Very flat. Very honest, he went to the back room and came back with clean cloth and a tin of pine tar salve. He set them on the table near her and went to heat water. "You don't need to offer yourself as a wife to stay here," he said with his back to her. "You're hurt. You stay until you're not." She said nothing for a long moment. When he turned, she was watching him with an expression he couldn't entirely read. "You could have shot me," she said. "I know," he said. "I didn't." Why? He thought about it. A good question, actually. He had not shot her because she was a woman, partly. Because he had seen enough men shoot first and investigate after, and he had decided a long time ago he did not want to be one of them. Partly all of that. "Don't know," he said, which was the most honest answer he had. He cleaned the wound while she sat rigid in the chair and did not make a sound. It was a graze, deep but clean, through the flesh below her left ribs. Nothing vital. The cold had slowed the bleeding and probably saved her. He packed it with the pine tar and wrapped it, and when he was done she let out one long breath, like a door coming off a hinge. "Sleep," he told her. He gave her his blanket and took the extra canvas for himself. He kept the fire going. He sat with his back to the wall across the room and watched the dark for a while, not sleeping, not quite, thinking about what morning was going to look like. She was asleep before he had finished the thought. Morning was gray and sharp. He woke before her and got the fire going again and put coffee on. She woke when the coffee smell reached her, sat up from the floor where she had somehow ended up, and looked at the room like she was relearning where she was. She told him her name was Nizhoni Runningwater. Her people were Chiricahua, from a band that had followed a man named Chato in better years. She had married at 17, a man 10 years older named Lando, a man she said was difficult and proud, and completely unwilling to leave the land his father had left him, which was why he was dead now and she was here. She said all of this without inflection, as if she were recounting something that had happened to someone else. He understood that. He had done it himself. He asked her where she thought she'd go after she healed. "I have a cousin," she said, "at the San Carlos agency. I have not seen her in 3 years. San Carlos is a long way from here," he said. "Yes," she said. They were quiet for a while, the way people are when they have both arrived at the same conclusion from different directions, and neither one of them wants to be the first to say it out loud. "Stay until the wound is healed," he said. "It's bad cold for traveling." She looked at her coffee. "I told you I would work. I heard you. I meant it. Then we'll find out," he said. What he expected was awkwardness. What he got instead was someone who knew how to inhabit a space. She did not rearrange anything or make demands. She watched how he did things, and then simply did them alongside him. She mended the tear in his canvas work coat without being asked. She moved through the shack with a quietness that was not meekness. It was competence, the quality of someone who has learned that silence is simply more efficient than noise. He was not sure what to do with that. The third day she asked if she could have the spare blanket to make something. He said yes, without asking what. By evening she had cut it and re-sewn it into a heavier winter vest, using a bone needle she had been carrying in the fold of her dress, and when she held it up for him to see, he realized she had sewn it for him, not herself. "Your coat is too thin for this cold," she said. "You do not have enough fat on you." He didn't know whether that was an insult or just an observation. He put the vest on. By the end of the first week, the worst of the cold had settled into something steady and manageable, the kind of cold that requires routine rather than drama. They had found a routine. He hauled wood and water and ran his traps. She cooked and cleaned and kept the fire in a way that was better than his. She understood the draft problem in south winds and had rigged a small baffle of flat stone that solved it, a solution he had not thought of in 6 years. They did not talk much. That surprised him, not because he had expected to talk. He had expected friction, the constant low-level friction of two people who did not know each other being in a small space together. What he had not expected was that the quiet between them would feel, increasingly, like it belonged to them both. He noticed it first one evening when he came in from checking the south trap line, and she had a fire going, and something on the stove, and he sat down and they ate without speaking. And when he was done he looked up and she was already looking at him, not with anything particular, just looking, and neither of them looked away quickly. He had forgotten that was something a person could do, just look, without it meaning anything threatening. He thought about her offer that first night, the wife thing, and how it had sounded like fear and nothing else. He did not want fear from her. He wanted the opposite, the version of her that gave him blunt assessments of his body fat and fixed his stovepipe and sewed him vests without ceremony. He wanted that, and the wanting of it alarmed him a little, because he had been very careful for 6 years not to want anything. She taught him 3 Chiricahua words that week, without being asked. He used them badly. She corrected him without laughing at him, which he appreciated. He taught her 2 English words she had been using wrong. She repeated them until she had them right, and then moved on. On the 8th day she asked if she could walk the trap line with him. He said yes, mostly because the wound needed moving to heal right, and partly because he was curious what she would make of his traps. She made a great deal of it. She looked at his rabbet sets the way a carpenter looks at someone else's joints. respectful but with opinions. She showed him how her people set a variation on the same trap, lower to the ground and angled differently, demonstrating it with a piece of dead branch so he could see the trigger mechanism. Her hands moved with the precision of someone who had done this since childhood. He watched her work and thought about all the years he had been trapping alone out here with a system that was good enough, never knowing there was a better one, and never having had anyone to show it to him. "Does it work better?" he said. "In this ground, yes," she said. "The rabbits here run low and close. Your set catches them, but it also lets them turn away. Mine does not." He reset 2 of his traps her way. The next morning, one of them had a rabbit in it. He didn't say anything about it, but she saw him reset the 3rd one when they went out again, and she didn't say anything either, which was the best kind of agreement. She also knew plants. The scrub in the hills above the shack was not as dead as it looked if you knew what to look for. She found a stand of dried joint fir she called by its Apache name, and explained it was for fever and bad joints, and she gathered enough to fill a small pouch. She found 3 other plants he would not have recognized as useful, and collected them the same way, each one wrapped separately in scraps of cloth. She told him the names in Chiricahua and the English where there was one. He wrote none of it down. He didn't need to. He was a scout, and his memory for useful information was very good. In the weeks she was there, the food got better and more varied than he had thought possible from the same stores. She made a broth one evening from bones he would have thrown to the coyotes, and it was the best thing he had eaten that month. He told her that. She looked at him over the bowl. "Your mother did not cook," she said. "It was not quite a question. She died when I was young," he said. "I mostly taught myself." "That is clear," she said, without cruelty, and went back to eating. He thought about that for the rest of the evening. He was not sure anyone had been able to read him clearly in a very long time, and he was not sure how he felt about that, but leaning toward, fine. Small things, all of it small, but small things are what a winter is made of. On the 9th day she tried to carry water from the well alone, and tore something in the wound site. He heard her and came outside, and found her sitting in the snow with the bucket on its side, and her hand pressed to her side. He did not say anything. He picked up the bucket, got the water, and then came back for her. She let him put his arm under hers and help her back inside. He had expected her to refuse that. She didn't. When she was settled by the fire, she said quietly, "Thank you," and he could hear in it that it cost her something, the thank you, that gratitude was not something she distributed casually. "Don't pull that again," he said. 2 more weeks, and you can carry anything you want." 2 more weeks, she repeated like she was calculating something. "At least," he said. She seemed to make a decision. "All right," she said. 2 more weeks. He found that he was glad. He did not allow himself to examine what that meant. Not yet. He went and chopped wood for an hour in the cold until the glad feeling settled into something he could live alongside. The 2nd week brought a cleaner cold, dry and still, with sky so blue it hurt to look at. She had started sleeping on the pallet in the back room, which he had put together from spare lumber and a canvas tick stuffed with dried grass. He slept by the stove. The arrangement was practical, and also gave him a solid wall between the version of himself that was sleeping and the version of himself that was awake and noticing things he had no business noticing. She asked him about his knee on the 12th day. He had been favoring it in the cold without meaning to. "Army," he said. "A fight?" "A mistake," he said. "I was crossing a wash I shouldn't have crossed in the dark, and my horse went down and I went down with it. Broke my knee on a rock. Not even enemy action. Just bad judgment." He had never told that story to anyone in that way, with that particular admission about whose fault it was. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My husband, when he refused to move off the land. I told him Reed's men would come back with more men. He said they wouldn't dare. He was wrong also. Did you believe him when he said it?" She thought about it. "I wanted to," she said. "That is different." "Yeah," Elias said. "It is." The fire crackled. Outside, the wind moved through the pinyon trees on the slope above the shack, a sound like water. They sat with that for a while, and the silence was so comfortable that Elias felt something in his chest loosen by degrees, some old tension he had held so long he had stopped noticing it. On the 14th day he walked the south fence line and found a post down in a section of wire cut. Not weather damage. He followed the tracks and they went north toward the territory road. 2 horses recently. He did not tell her yet because there was nothing to tell yet, but he checked the load and the sharps and cleaned it and put it near the door. And the next morning he rode into Engel. He told no one why he was there. He bought supplies, drank a cup of coffee at the back of the mercantile, and listened to the 3 conversations happening simultaneously in the store. 2 of them were about weather. One of them was about Reed. Reed's men had been through the area asking questions about an Apache woman. Reward posted, $50. The man talking about it seemed torn between admiration for the number and discomfort about what it implied. $50 was serious money. Elias bought his supplies and rode home. He told her when he got back. She received it without surprise, which told him she had expected this. She sat very still for a moment and then said, "I should leave." "Where would you go?" he said. "Ground is frozen. Reed's men are on the territory road. Your side isn't right yet. I am not asking you to risk your ranch," she said. Very direct, very clear. "My ranch is a shack and 40 acres of gravel," he said. "I'm not crying about the risk to it." She looked at him for a long moment. "Why?" she said, and the word had the same weight it had the night she arrived, the same genuine puzzlement, the sense of a woman trying to understand a system of rules she had never seen applied to herself before. He didn't have a clean answer. He had been trying to arrive at one for 2 weeks. "Because no one deserves what Reed's doing," he said. "And because you fixed my stovepipe." The corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but in the neighborhood of one. "Those are not equal reasons," she said. "No," he agreed. "They're not." He went out and tended to the mule. When he came back in, she had supper on and she was humming something low under her breath. He recognized it as something she hummed sometimes when she was working. A repeating phrase in 4 bars, minor key, with a quality to it that was old and unhurried. He sat down and didn't say anything, and she didn't stop. After supper she told him a little about the song. It was something her mother had sung, something from their people's time before the reservations. A song about water, about following water west in the summer and following it down from the mountains in the fall. Her mother had known dozens of songs like that. Nizhoni only remembered this one fully. "She died?" Elias asked. "At San Carlos, 2 years ago." A pause. The water at San Carlos is not like the water in the songs. He had heard that. He had heard a lot about San Carlos over the years, from men who had been involved in the relocations, and from Chiricahua Apaches who had gone there. None of what he had heard was good. "You don't have to go to San Carlos," he said, "after Reed's men are dealt with." She looked at him. "Where else would I go?" He didn't answer that directly. He wasn't ready to, but the question sat between them, open, not uncomfortable. That night, lying by the stove, he thought about what he was doing with a clarity he had not allowed himself in weeks. He was harboring a woman, a property speculator wanted for reasons that were probably not legal, but were certainly dangerous. He was doing it because she had shown up half dead, and something in him had responded to that, something he had thought was quiet years ago. And now, 2 weeks on, it was more than that. He knew it. She probably knew it too. The question was what to do about it, and the answer to that was, not yet. Not while Reed's men were circling. He slept badly, got up early, made coffee. She was already awake when he came out, sitting by the stove with her knees drawn up, the Chiricahua vest she had made from her own blanket wrapped around her. He poured her a cup without asking. She took it without thanking him, which meant they were past the formality of thank yous. And that meant something. He told her his plan. They would keep the sharps inside. He would fix the fence post and the cut wire so any visitor would know the place was maintained and watched. He would not go into Engel again until this settled. If Reed's men came to the property, they were trespassing, and trespassing on private land in New Mexico territory had consequences. She listened to all of this and then said, "You are assuming they will follow the law." "I'm assuming they'll consider the cost," he said. "Reed has money. His men have guns." "I have the home ground," he said, "and I'm a better shot than any man Reed is paying $50 a head for." She studied him. "You sound very sure of that." "I'm sure enough," he said. She nodded slowly. Then she said, "I am not a bad shot myself." He looked at her. "My husband taught me," she said. "After the first time Reed's men came, he taught me to shoot because he did not trust the territory to protect us." "Do you want a weapon?" he said. "Yes," she said. No hesitation. He went to the back room and came back with a Henry rifle, old but sound, and a box of shells. He handed them to her. She held the rifle with the ease of someone who had held one before, checked the load, and set it beside her. "Good," she said. He thought, yes. The snow came back the third week. Not the dry cold of before, but a genuine storm, wet and heavy, piling against the door and banking up the north wall to window height by the second day. They were effectively pinned in. He cut wood, and she kept the fire. They played cards he found in a coffee tin, and she beat him twice at a game she made up with rules that seemed designed to expose when he was bluffing. He was a bad bluffer. She found this amusing in a contained, private way. On the second day of the storm, she showed him the beadwork on her belt pouch. It was geometric, a series of diamond patterns in red and white and blue-black. And she explained that each pattern had a name, that the diamond was associated with the 4 directions, that the colors were meaningful in combination. She explained it without lecturing, just talking, the way people talk when they're stuck indoors with someone who seems interested. He was interested. He asked questions. She asked him questions in return, about his scouting years, about what the territory had looked like before so much of it was fenced and grazed down. He told her things he had not told anyone, things he thought had been sealed up. At some point during those 2 storm days, the silence between them stopped being the silence of 2 strangers and became the silence of 2 people who no longer needed to fill the air between sentences. Elias noticed the change because it had a weight to it. He had felt it only once before in his life, with a woman he had married young, who had died of a fever on the Arkansas border 2 years later. He had not allowed himself to feel it since. He allowed himself to feel it now, not to do anything about it, just to stop refusing it. On the night the storm cleared, she was sitting by the stove, and she said, without looking at him, "Why did you never marry again?" He had not told her he had been married. He had mentioned a woman who had died in passing in one of the conversations. She had been listening more carefully than he had realized. "I didn't see a reason to," he said. "You didn't want to," she said. "That is different." She was using his words back at him. He recognized them. "Yeah," he said. "That's true. I did not want to marry Lando either," she said quietly. "Not at first. My father chose him. He was a good man in the ways men are measured by other men. He was not easy to know." A pause. "Are you?" he said. She turned to look at him then. "Am I what?" "Easy to know." She considered that. "No," she said, "but I am honest." "That is better." "Yeah," he said. "It is." They looked at each other. The fire was burning low, and the room was warm, and the storm had gone quiet, and there was nothing between them but 8 feet of plank floor, and whatever they were both thinking, which was probably the same thing. He got up and put another log on the fire. She watched him. "Go to sleep," he said. "It'll be clear tomorrow." "I know," she said. She didn't move for a moment. Then she said, "Elias," the first time she had used his given name. He turned. "Thank you," she said. "Not for tonight. For all of it." He stood there a moment with the log iron in his hand, the fire starting up behind him. "You're welcome, Nizhoni," he said, and the words sat right in his mouth in a way he had not expected. She went to the back room. He banked the fire and sat for a long time in the dark before he slept. The clear days after the storm were deceptive. The sun came back and the snow began to glaze. He worked the fence line and she came with him. Her side healed enough now that she could move freely. She found a place where a second fence wire had been cut, farther south than the first, which meant the reconnaissance had been systematic. Someone had walked his property line. Someone who had known what to look for, he told her that evening. She received it without flinching. "How many days do we have?" she said. "I don't know. Maybe 3. Maybe 10. Depends on whether they're sure enough to move on this or still looking." "What do you want to do?" she said. "Not what should we do. What do you want to do?" He appreciated the distinction. "I want them to come here," he said. "This is my ground. I know every line of sight, every sound, every approach. If we go somewhere else, we're strangers. Here I'm not." She nodded. "I will be by the north window," she said. "The angle from there covers the approach from the territory road." He looked at her. "You said this is good ground?" she said. "It is better ground with two people who know it." He didn't argue with that. He showed her the north window angle, the dead zone behind the water trough, the place on the ridge where a man could sit and see the whole yard. She listened and asked practical questions and made a plan of her own that fit inside his. And when they were done, they went back in and ate supper, and neither of them talked about it any further. There was nothing more to say. 2 nights later he woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of horses on the approach trail. He was at the door before his boots were fully on. He could hear them, 2 horses at least, moving carefully, trying for quiet and not achieving it in the frozen crust of snow. He heard the shack's back wall, and then looked left, and Nizhoni was at the north window with the Henry, one eye along the barrel, her face composed. He thought, "She is not afraid." He stepped outside onto the porch. The cold hit him. The sky was clear and the stars were out, and by their light he could see 2 men at the edge of his yard, their horses stopped, their hands visible. "This is private property," Elias said. He had the sharps at his shoulder before the last word was out. The 2 men looked at each other. One of them was bigger than he'd expected, a heavy-set man with a broad hat and a thick coat, a pistol on each hip. The other was leaner, sitting his horse loose-limbed, a rifle across his saddle. "We're here for the woman," the big one said. "Not looking for trouble with you. You cut my fence lines," Elias said. "Both of them. You rode my property looking for a way in. That's trouble. Reed wants the woman. She's Apache. She got no legal standing to. She's standing on my land," Elias said. "That gives her standing enough." The lean one was looking at the north window. He had seen the Henry. He said something low to the big man that Elias could not make out. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," the big man said. "You cut my fences," Elias said. "Come back to look for what wasn't yours. Sounds to me like you're the ones making things hard." A long silence, the kind of silence that has decisions inside it. Then the lean one moved. His hand came up off the rifle and across his body, and Elias read the intention a half-second before it became action. He put a round into the snow 6 inches in front of the lean man's horse. The horse threw its head and sidestepped hard, and the lean man spent the next 4 seconds just riding. The sound of the sharps in the night air was enormous. It was not the kind of sound that permitted conversation after it. "Next one's not the snow," Elias said. He had already reloaded the way a man does when he has been a scout. The sharps was up again. "You want to tell Reed that she's here and you chose to leave? You go ahead and do that. Come back with a legal paper and we'll talk. Come back without one and I'll shoot the next man that comes through that fence line." The big man looked at the window. He looked at Elias. He had the eyes of a man doing arithmetic. "This ain't over," he said. "It is for tonight," Elias said. They rode back toward the road. He tracked the sound of them for 5 minutes after they disappeared. When he was sure they were gone, he came back inside. Nizhoni was at the table with the Henry laid across her knees, watching the north window. "They left?" she said. "They left." She let out a breath. "You put the shot in front of the horse." "Yeah. You could have put it through him." "Yeah," he said. "Wanted to give them a reason to think about it instead." A dead man doesn't go back and tell Reed that this particular scout is not worth the trouble. She looked at him for a moment with something in her eyes he couldn't fully catalogue. Not quite admiration, not quite gratitude, something older than either of those. "Come sit down," she said. "You're shaking." He was. Not from fear, exactly. It was the aftermath of readiness, the body deciding it could let go of what it had been holding for days. He sat down, and she put a hand on the back of his, just briefly, just for a moment, and then took it away and got up to make coffee, because that was something useful she could do. He sat there with the shape of her hand still on his, and tried to decide what to do about the thing that was happening inside him, which was considerable and getting harder to set aside. The next day he rode to Engel and went not to the mercantile, but to the county land office, which was a single room behind the magistrate's office and run by a man named Teague, who had been there since before Elias arrived in the territory. He spent 2 hours with Teague going through the records on the land Reed claimed. What he found was exactly what he had suspected but needed to see in writing. The grant was disputed, the original survey was contested, and there were 2 prior homestead filings on portions of the land that had never been properly resolved. He wrote a letter to the Territorial Land Commissioner in Santa Fe, citing the records, citing Reed's conduct, citing the death of Lando Runningwater, and the assault on his wife. He signed his name to it with the year and the county and every specific he could put on paper. He gave it to Teague to send with the next postal rider. Then he went back home. When he told Nizhoni what he had done, she went very still. "It won't happen fast," he said. "The territory works slow, but it creates a record. Makes what Reed is doing harder to do quietly," she said. "No one has done that before for us." "Someone should have," he said. "A long time ago." She looked out the window. "It will not bring Lando back." "No," he said. "It won't." She turned. "But it is something," she said. "It is real." He nodded. She came across the room and stood in front of him and looked at him directly. There were no tears in her eyes. That was not how she was made, he had come to understand. She expressed things differently, in how she held herself, in the quality of her attention, in the particular weight of her silence. "Thank you," she said. He had heard her say thank you before. This was different. This was the version of it that carried the whole weight of the thing, no part of it held back. He nodded. He did not trust himself to say much in that moment. They ate supper late that evening. She had made something with dried corn and a rabbit he had brought in. A slow-cooked thing that was better than what it had any right to be. The shack smelling of wood smoke and food and the particular warmth of an interior that 2 people have maintained through a hard winter. He looked at the room and thought that it did not feel the same as it had in October. He was not sure he could have named the difference to anyone, but he felt it. After supper, she showed him the beadwork she had been working on in the evenings. A small piece, barely palm-sized, in the blue, black, and red and white of the diamond pattern. She put it on the table in front of him. "It is for carrying," she said. "You tie it to a coat or a belt. My mother made one for my father. I made one for Lando, but it burned with the house." She paused. "I made this one for you." He picked it up. It was fine work, even with a bone needle and what little thread she had found in his stores. The diamonds were even. The colors were clear. He looked up at her. "You don't have to," she said. "It is just, I want to," he said again. "Thank you." She sat back down. She was not smiling. She was something better than smiling. She was settled, like something inside her had stopped working against itself. They sat until the fire burned low. He didn't rebuild it that night. He let it settle to coals and watched the light change, and she sat across from him and watched the same light, and they were quiet together in a way that was not nothing. It was, in fact, the furthest possible thing from nothing. Reed did not send men again that winter. The letter to Santa Fe took 3 weeks to arrive and another 4 weeks to generate a response. But the response, when it came, was a territorial investigator who rode out in February and spent 2 days going through the land records in Ingle. Whatever he found, it was enough to put a quiet freeze on Reed's activity in that part of the territory, while the commission reviewed the claims. This was not justice exactly, but it was the kind of pressure that made a man like Reed calculate his odds differently. He had other land, other towns, other disputes. Nizhoni Runningwater was not worth a territorial investigation. She heard the news in February when Elias rode in for the report. He told her straight, all of it. The investigator's visit, the Land Commission's provisional freeze on Reed's claims, and what it meant for her safety now. She listened. She asked sharp, specific questions. When she had all of it, she said quietly, "For now, then." "For now," he agreed. "It could be more later. Hard to say." She nodded. "I understand that," she said. "I have lived with, for now, my whole life." He thought about what she had said to him that first night. "I will cook, carry wood, whatever you want from a wife," said from her knees in the snow, from a place of pure desperation. He thought about how far they had come from that, in the same 4 walls, over the same winter. He said, "That thing you offered me the night you came." She looked at him. "I don't want it the way you offered it," he said. "I want to be clear about that." "I never did. But," he stopped, started again. "I'm asking you something different now. Something I'm choosing, not something you're giving me to stay alive. The fire was steady between them. The February light through the small window was thin and pale. "What are you asking?" she said. He said, "Stay, not as a servant, not as a debt. Stay because you want to, and because we're good at this together, and because I think we're both tired of doing everything alone. That's what I'm asking." She looked at him for a long time. He let her look. He had spent 6 years learning to wait, without fidgeting, to sit inside silence without filling it with noise. He sat inside it now. She said, "You know what your town will say." "I know what they'll say," he said. "And you do not care. They don't come out here," he said. "And if they do, they can go home." Something moved in her face, something like relief, but slower, more considered. "I am not easy," she said. "I know," he said. "Neither am I. I will keep my own name," she said. "Of course you will," he said. She was quiet another moment, the kind of quiet that meant the decision was made, but she was examining it from every angle before she put it into words. "All right," she said. 2 words, no ceremony, but both of them knew what they meant. He reached across the table and put his hand over hers, the back of it, just resting there. She turned her hand over and let her fingers close around his. They sat like that, the coals warm, the pale winter light coming through the window, 2 people who had come to this from the worst possible direction and had somehow arrived at something they had not known to want. Spring came late to the Oscura Mountains that year. But when it came, it was thorough, the way springs are after brutal winters. Sudden, complete, transforming the gravel flats into something almost green. The pinyon on the ridge put out new growth, and the creek ran with meltwater and grit. The mule stood in the yard with her eyes half closed, taking the sun on her neck with the contentment of a creature that has come through something and knows it. He found her one morning on the east slope above the shack, in the place where the ridge curved and you could see all the way to the San Andres Range in the south. She was sitting with her knees drawn up and her face turned toward the morning light, and she had the beadwork in her lap and was adding to it an extension of the pattern. And when he came up and sat beside her, she did not look up from it, but she moved slightly closer, in a way that was its own kind of answer. "Your cousins at San Carlos," he said. "Do you want to try to reach them?" She was quiet for a moment. "When the road is passable," she said, "I want them to know I am alive. I want them to know that—" She stopped, considered, "that I am well. We can ride down in April," he said. She looked at him. "Together?" "If you want me there," he said. She looked back at the far mountains. "I want you there," she said. They sat in the morning light, with the new season coming on slow and steady around them. He thought about the night he had kicked that door open with the sharps at his shoulder, the rifle he had raised at a woman who turned out to be the last thing he had expected, the person who would make the silence stop being a choice and start being simply what it was. 2 people, comfortable with each other, together in a world that had not made it easy. He had raised a rifle at her. He had lowered it. The whole of this winter had been the distance between those 2 moments, and he would spend the better part of a long life being grateful he had made that small choice in the dark. She finished a row of beadwork and held the piece up to look at it, added another row, put it in her pocket. "Come inside," she said. "I will make coffee." He got up, she got up beside him. They walked down from the ridge together, and the sun was warm on the back of his neck, and she was humming low the song about water and the old routes west. And neither of them said anything more because there was nothing left that needed to be said.